On behalf of the Western Men's Hockey Program and our Seventh Man Alumni Group, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Western Mustang Men's Hockey Hot Stove Series. We're very much looking forward to having you on board and showcasing 6 outstanding guests over the next 2 months. It's been a very difficult, challenging time for our Alumni Relations and Development team. Our group here at Western, who we've gained so much momentum putting on alumni events over the last year and a half, and to have this pause because of the health crisis and not to be able to connect personally with the events that we have had is very, very difficult. So we thought giving you an opportunity to connect virtually with this Hot Stove series would be something that would be very interesting, very valuable, and at least give us a way to get together again, and with the hopes that we're back together personally in the spring or summer. Very, very fortunate to introduce a couple of great folks here tonight. I'd first like to introduce our host for all 6 of the Hot Stove series, Ryan Robinson. Ryan is a good friend. Ryan has been the sports information officer with Western Athletics the last 3 years. He's the TV voice of the local junior team, the London Nationals, and he's also a professor at Fanshawe College. Ryan has done a lot of work, not only in preparation for tonight's guest, but also behind the scenes for us, creating all the tech side and the show you're about to see. So I want to thank Ryan very much. And most importantly, I'd like to introduce a man I've known for a long, long time, Mr. Mike Johnston. Mike is the current head coach and general manager of the Portland Winterhawks in the Western Hockey League, and former head coach of the Pittsburg Penguins in the National Hockey League. Mike has had a long and storied coaching career, and actually, to be honest, one of the best men I've known in the game. Mike started his career in the ACAC, in the Alberta College Athletic Conference, moved on to the University of Calgary, and then as head coach of the UNB team and the CIU, which is now U Sport, obviously. Mike then moved to the national program when it was centralized out of Calgary, onto the Vancouver Canucks as a an assistant coach with Mark Crawford, then on to the LA Kings as an assistant coach with Mark as well, before moving to Portland for his first stint of 5 years. And then on to Pittsburgh, which is very well publicized, for 2 years as the head coach there with the Penguins, before coming back to his current position now as the head coach and GM of the Winterhawks. It doesn't end there, though, folks. Mike has a tremendous amount of international experience, and I actually have to go to my cheat sheet to kind of tell about the accolades he's had in international experience. I think 3 World Championship gold medals, 3 World Junior gold medals, 2 World Championship silvers, and a World Championship bronze to go along with his WHL championship. The cupboard behind him right now is filled with all those medals right now, I think. So we're very, very pleased to have Mike on board with us tonight. Mike and Ryan will chat for about 40 minutes, just a conversation, question and answer. Mike is out in Portland right now, Portland, Oregon. And then for the last 10 or 12 minutes of the show, we'll invite the audience, the registered guests, to ask questions. And the way you'll do that is beside your viewing box on the right side, you'll see a chat bar or a chat screen. At the very bottom of that screen, there's an area where you can chat in your questions. So when Ryan calls for the questions, the last 10 or 12 minutes, please type in the questions you would have for Mike about any of the topics covered, and Ryan will get to as many as he possibly can. And I would just say, if we can leave that chat blank until the question and answer period, that would be great. We did a little run through of this on Monday night with a pretend guest and a number of people in the audience, and the chat got a little distracting, I will say. So let's leave the chat for the Q&A session at the end. So Mike, welcome. Ryan, take it away. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks, Clark. I appreciate that. Thanks a lot, Clark. And it took, the best part is I did all this prep of basically taking Mike through his career and asking him a number of questions, but Clark took care of the bio off the top. So I feel like the spoiler's taken care of, but
he's coached for a long time.
First and foremost, Clark, I know you asked me to get involved last year with the Seventh Man dinner when we did that. I know it feels like a different world, but I was excited to do it then. And when Clark came to me and kind of told me about this idea that he had for the Hot Stove series, I was excited for it. And then when he said, "Hey, can you help us out by doing that thing that you do too much, which is called talking?" I said, "Sure, no problem. I'll gussy up the basement office and we'll make it look like it's something." So Clark, thanks to you, and I'm hoping we'll get back to a rink sometime soon, and I can keep bugging you by shooting photos and pictures and all that kind of stuff. So
looking forward to it.
Alrighty, Clark, we will let you be the general of keeping track of all the guys in the chat room and make sure things don't go a little too sideways there. So good to see Clark. I haven't seen him in a while, which is awesome. And first and foremost, Mike, nice to meet you. I know we've exchanged a few emails back and forth, but I jokingly say whenever been asked to do this kind of thing in the past, you end up doing so much research, you feel like you know the person by the end of it, and then you start talking to them. So first and foremost, again, thank you for doing this and for helping out the hockey program here at Western sort of thing. I know Clark's put so much work into this, and obviously kind of utilizing some of his connections to bring in some exciting guests. I know when we kind of announced everything, there was some excitement, and then I was saying to Clark earlier, I felt like, with some of the news of the week and that kind of thing, on top of all the, other elements we can talk about, I think you and I could probably go about 2 or 3 hours, but I promise I'll only keep it to about 40 minutes.
Well, I appreciate the invitation. And when Clark reached out to me, we've been friends for a long time. And my start in coaching began in Canadian University hockey. So anything I can do to help players or coaches or programs, and Western's had a long tradition of a great program, certainly over the years, and it's nice to see them still staying at the top in the Ontario League for University Hockey. And I think ventures like this are what we're all used to now, reaching out on Zoom, reaching out on some of the podcasts and shows, and I think it's great. We did this with our players. We're starting to do it with our alumni here in Portland. So I think these initiatives, I applaud you guys for starting this.
So as I said, we'll kind of go through. I don't want to go right to asking you about Crosby and Malkin and that, because you've done many more things than that sort of thing. So we'll probably get to that at some point. But you mentioned off the top involvement with university and college hockey early in your coaching career kind of thing. How much are those I know a lot of the times, especially in hockey, talking to coaches, they always maybe have I don't want to say the fondest memories, but especially those first few times sort of thing. Those are they the most memorable times sort of thing where getting, the career going?
Well, I've really enjoyed all the stops along the way, but when I started, I finished my university degree and I was looking for a job. I was going to be a teacher. And at that time, there were no teaching jobs in Manitoba. I finished playing at Brandon University. I went from Acadia to Brandon. My 5th year, I had my teaching license. But as I said, there were no jobs around. So at that time, I decided, well, I'm going to have to look at different options. And a few of our players from Brandon University were going to go to Australia to play. So I thought I would go to Australia for a year and a half and play some hockey. That was the extent of my pro career. And what happened down there was they asked me to coach the pro team and coach the youth team. So my first experience in coaching was an opportunity in Australia, a place where they didn't have a great hockey program, and allowed me to develop and experiment and basically do whatever I wanted. And then when I came back to Canada, Dave King, who had coached against me, asked me if I was interested in applying for a college job in Alberta. So I applied for the job at Camrose College, which is now Augustana, in small college hockey in Alberta. And I got the job because I could live in residence, I could teach, and I thought I could coach, but I didn't really know. I had no experience at all. So I took the job at Camrose College. And in the province of Alberta at that time, there was Dave King, there was George Kingston, Al Furchuk at Red Deer, Perry Pern at Nate. And then the first day on the job, I went in to buy my equipment, went to United Cycle in Edmonton, and the guy who came out of the back room introduced himself as the manager of United Cycle and the coach of the Sherwood Park midget team, Ken Hitchcock. So Ken Hitchcock was an established minor hockey coach at that time, and that was my first day on the job. I met Ken Hitchcock, and we've been friends. So I was really fortunate when I started that I had some great coaches around me because I knew nothing about coaching at that time.
What was that aspect, kind of, as you say, a couple years, a couple years in Alberta, then you go and you could coach at the university level too. Did it kind of pick up quickly, kind of thing, or did it take some time to kind of, bend the ear of a few people and, those connections that kind of come in the hockey world?
Well, after my time in Camrose, I knew I needed my master's degree, and that's what you needed during those years to coach at the university level in Canada. So I went back to the University of Calgary, took my master's degree in coaching science, and then fortunately enough, the University of New Brunswick was looking for a coach when I graduated. So I helped George Kingston, Willie Desjardins at the University of Calgary, and then got hired right away at the University of New Brunswick. And at that time, New Brunswick, they were struggling. They had won 2 games the year before, and I think 2 or 3 the year before that. And I came in, I got a very good assistant, a local guy to work with me, and we tried to rebuild that program. And certainly the coaches that have come after me, Mike Kelly, Gardner McDougall, have done a phenomenal job. The program is always a top-notch program. And I loved it. In Fredericton, coaching at the university level was very competitive. Recruiting was hard. I think Clark would say that that's probably the hardest part, but it's still enjoyable. But, coaching was, especially against the people that I had to coach against, I thought I learned on the fly, and I was fortunate that, a lot of those coaches, especially university coaches, were sharing of what they did and how they did things and helped me really grow as a coach.
Clark mentioned he's had to use the cheat sheet for the Hockey Canada and the international, international tournaments and victories and that kind of thing. I know a lot of people that when they go and work for and work with Hockey Canada, whether it be on a more full-time basis or tournaments here and there sort of thing. You spent quite a few years there with Hockey Canada in that kind of in between the university stage and before moving up to the NHL. What were those years like? Because there's some World Junior, there's Spangler Cups, there's Olympics, and that kind of thing. There was a little bit of everything in that time, wasn't there?
Well, there was. And when I first took my very first year of coaching at Camrose College, I contacted Alberta Amateur Hockey, and I said that I would do anything in the summer if I could get involved in their under 16, under 17 programs. I just wanted to go to their camps to work with the coaches, work with the elite athletes, see what it was like to work with elite athletes, because I really hadn't done that. And so from day one, I was always interested in the international game. And I was fortunate, Tom Rennie, who's now the president of Hockey Canada, both him and I coached the under 17 team for BC and Alberta. We coached together. And then when I went to the University of New Brunswick, I applied every year for the World Junior job. And in those days, rarely did a college coach get considered for the World Junior. And I think I bugged them for 5 years in a row. I applied every year. And finally, I got to coach in the World Junior as an assistant with Don Hay, who's coaching with me now. And it's funny how, as Clark would say, how interconnected and how small the hockey world is. The people that I bumped into as a younger guy became lifelong friends and lifelong mentors. But the international game for me, when you could coach for Canada or be involved in a Spangler Cup or World Championship, and I was fortunate enough to go to the Olympics with Mark Crawford and Andy Murray in the Nagano Olympics, the first Olympics with NHL players. Like, those are special, special moments.
Any particular? I know it's tough to pull one highlight out, sort of thing. That's the old journalist question, right? What's the one highlight from all that? And I know it's usually there's way too many to keep track of, but are there kind of a couple, highlights or key stories or just memorable aspects from that time?
Well, in the early 90s, I was coaching at the University of New Brunswick, and Dave King phoned me in October. He was with the national team, and they were preparing for the Olympics. And he said to me, he said, would you be interested in taking a B team, Team Canada, to the Spengler Cup? And I said, well, yeah, of course, I would love that. So he offered me the head coaching job of the Spengler Cup team. So we went to Switzerland for Christmas, assembled an all-star team of players in Europe, a couple players from the American League, and I coached in the Spengler Cup. We won in overtime. Fabian Joseph scored in overtime. We beat the team from Sweden in the final. That, to me, I felt kind of launched my career. It was a scary tournament because I felt that I didn't know if I was ready for that level of coaching, and it was professional, and it was do or die in the Spengler Cup. You lose a game and you're out of the tournament at that time. So I just found that there's certain moments in your coaching life or your career where they're defining moments where you may go backwards or you go forward. And from that moment, I went forward.
Obviously, after Hockey Canada, as we heard earlier, you make the move to the NHL. You go to Vancouver. I'll ask you your thoughts on the Canucks situation. I think I'd be crazy if I didn't ask a coach of your stature what you think's going on with the Canucks right now. But we'll get to that in a second. You go to the NHL. Is that another one of those connection scenarios? As you mentioned earlier, there's a few names that all of a sudden, anybody who knows the way things have gone in Vancouver in the last number of years, was that another connection scenario which kind of took you in that avenue?
Well, the Nagano Olympics were in '98, and Mark Crawford was appointed the head coach, and Andy Murray and I were working with Team Canada. So we went with the NHL players to Nagano. After the tournament, Mark Crawford got hired in Vancouver as the head coach. He had left Colorado and was in Vancouver, hired by Brian Burke. And Mark asked me, we had worked together for a whole year leading up to the Olympics, and just as the hockey connections go, he felt comfortable with me, and he asked me if I'd come in. And then he brought the late Jack McElhargy up from the minors, and we coached together. And I said to my wife, I said, well, if I'm leaving university hockey, I left to the national team, 5-year stints every year. I said, we're going to the NHL, and our lifespan at the NHL level of an NHL coach or even assistant coach at that time was 2 to 3 years. I said, we want to be careful. We don't want to set down roots too quickly because I could be gone. It turned out that we were 7 years in Vancouver. It was amazing. It was working for Brian Burke, and we can talk about Brian because I believe my family would say to this day, of all the people that I've worked for over the years, Brian was the best by far. Like, he treated the kids a certain way, he treated my wife a certain way. He is nothing like he is in the media. He has a certain persona in the media. He's kind of a brash, hard-nosed guy, but when you work for him, you couldn't work for a better guy than Brian Burke.
I think we've over the last couple of days, there's been a lot of that conversation, especially the folks that work over at Sportsnet. We're obviously surprised. A lot of them, even Elliot Friedman, obviously a Western grad or former Western student, he got to break the story because he's sitting next to Brian when he said, "Oh, by the way, this is what I'm doing this afternoon." So I know there's been a lot of that conversation about Brian Burke over the last little bit. From the news, kind of him going back into the game, sort of thing. I know some people have said. I know I got a chance to read Brian's book. It was the first one I picked up in a while. But he even in the book, he kind of said, I think I'm done with the game. I'm happy to be doing this media thing. But he said he was obviously pretty excited for that opportunity. Were you surprised, knowing him well, that he was making the move from the media side of things back into the game, or was it? I know a lot of people have said it's kind of as much as he said he wanted to stay in the media, it's not that big of a surprise that he wanted back into the active part of the game.
Well, I think anybody that's out of it really wants another shot at it. And I think Brian was the same. But to be honest, I thought he did a phenomenal job. And just watching him on Hockey Night in Canada and some of the shows that he's been involved, he had a good presence and he studied the game. He knew the people, and he understood why moves were made, how players react. And I was a bit surprised. Yeah, I was. But Pittsburgh is getting a guy, as I said, who's great to work with. And if you're a GM, as Hexie is there, or if you're a coach like Mike Sullivan, I remember in Vancouver, the first meeting with the Canucks, when Mark Crawford, myself, and Jack were in the dressing room, Brian Burke came down and told the players simply that, he said, if you need me for anything, my office door is open. But if you ever come in and talk about the power play or talk about what line you're on or who you're playing with, you're out in a second. I don't want to have anything to do with that. So he supports his coaches. He supports his players. He is, as I said, he's great to work for. So I think going into Pittsburgh with Mario and with Ron Burkle and with David Morehouse, it's a good organization. They've still got quality players there right now. I know they're on the cusp, but I think Brian will do a very good job.
And he's even mentioned in the last couple of days, and I don't want to go too far away from you on this, but obviously it's a scenario where he said, kind of to that same point, he said, Ron's, doing the GM side of things. I'm there to kind of take a few things off of his plate kind of thing. And I'm sure, from, and again, just an outsider perspective, not having a personal relationship sort of thing, it's interesting. And as you say, a lot of people have said that the game is a little bit better when Brian Burke's in it. I'm sure that maybe a little more brash and some more a few liners, I'm sure. But yeah, it seems like a heck of a guy.
Yeah, it's entertaining with Brian as always. And I think that Pittsburgh, with if you look at it, when I was there, that's a major sports market. You've got the Steelers, you've got the Pirates, you've got the Penguins. So I lived right downtown in Pittsburgh. I could walk to the rink. I could walk to the baseball and football stadium. For the people that know Pittsburgh well, that's how close everything is there. But it's a big-time sports market. And a personality like Brian Burke will do well in a market like that, I believe, because they like those big-time personalities.
They like to yell a lot. I think it's probably like Vancouver, isn't it?
Well, Vancouver's a tough market, I'll tell you that. You lose a few games in a row, you hear it in Vancouver, wherever you go in the city. But that's the fun part of it, because you win a few games in a row and they love you. You lose a few, they hate you. People in Toronto, they know what the way that is.
It's just a different version, right? So obviously 2008 you go to Portland. Was that a transition or an adjustment going from university hockey to to the national program to the NHL, going to junior, or was that just kind of enjoyment of that development portion of the game, even going back to earlier for you when you said you wanted to kind of get involved at the kind of the amateur level sort of thing to start out your career?
Well, there are two parts to that. One is I could come in as a general manager, and I really enjoyed the university part of it, where I was recruiting, I was building the team, I was also coaching. So I kind of like that more encompassing aspect of the coaching job, rather than at the NHL level, as a head coach or an assistant coach, you have your slot. That's your slot, and this is what you do. And even as an assistant, it's more defined. But the thing I liked about going to junior is that I had a chance as a general manager and coach to kind of script what the organization was going to look like moving forward. The other part, though, like you mentioned, I had never coached teenage kids before, except the few that made it to the NHL. Like the Sedins came in Vancouver when I was there. Kopitar came in LA when I was there. So a few of those young guys I had a chance to coach. But I'd never coached in that 15 to 20 age group. And when I got to Portland, I knew there were going to be challenges with it. But that's what I love the most about the job here in Portland is you can really impact kids from 15 to 20. We draft them here as they turn 15, and they leave our program at 20. You can make a huge impact on their personality, how they mature, their strength, conditioning, them as a hockey player. And in the end, you have an opportunity to help players achieve their dream of playing in the NHL. And since I've been in Portland with Travis Green 10 years ago, we've had 40 players sign NHL contracts. So 40 players, we've allowed them the opportunity to develop, and then we're like parents when it comes to draft day, and we see the kid being drafted, and we see them play their first NHL game. You're just proud like a parent. So it's a unique age group, and it's like everything else is presented as challenges, but I've really enjoyed coaching kids at that age. And especially if you're kind of a coaching purist and you believe in development, you believe in practice, you believe in training, then you'd like the junior environment.
It's one of those things where you see a kid walk in the door at, as you say, 15, 16 kind of thing at a 5'10" and 140 pounds. And I'm sure from a fan's perspective, they're looking at this kid going, that's the first round pick you picked this year. And then all of a sudden, it's 17, 18, 19. All of a sudden you go that's the reason we did it, sort of thing. How much is it that, as you say, the parent aspect in the, I know talking to coaches and general managers at the junior level, they always kind of say there's never a shortage of reference of my kids.
Well, I'd have to say that there's two things that have changed. One, social media for the kids. I think it helps in some ways, and I think it adds a lot of stress for young players. And the second thing is players today, unlike in our day, they have an army of people around them. So they have their parents, they have their agent, they have their shooting coach, their skating coach. They've got a number of people that are surrounding them and working with them and helping them. So it's the ability to bring all those parties together and to buffer what is the important information that they need to have, to allow them to trust you, that you're giving them good, solid feedback that's going to help their career, and honest feedback, and you're going to hold them accountable. So it's you have to, especially a person as you've moved on in coaching, you better keep current with today's player, because if you don't, you're going to go by the wayside. So you have to make sure, and I have to make sure, that every year I understand what do we have to do with our meetings individually and as a team. How do we have to change? How do we have to adapt? How short their attention span is, feedback, all these different things that 15 to 20-year-olds deal with, they're much different than pro hockey. Pro hockey, you have them for practice and a meeting, and they leave, they go home to their families, and that's it. You don't have near as much contact. At the junior level, you have a lot of contact with the kids.
I want to talk to you a little bit more about the current situation in the league. We'll talk about that in a minute, but I've got to get to, as we're kind of around 20 minutes in, I got to be cognizant of time, because I know we want to make sure we get some questions and answers in at the end. 2014, what was that call like when the call came to say you're being hired as the head coach for the Pittsburgh Penguins at that NHL level? Was that is that one of those scenarios where you knew where you were when the call happened, or did it? Is there a backstory behind that day kind of thing?
Well, people often ask you, and as Clark knows, they say, there's a job opening in Detroit or Pittsburgh or Vancouver, are you going to apply? And I always tell them, in my experience in the game of hockey, you never apply. It's just something that comes at you, either through, as an assistant coach, you may have known the head coach, or somebody put in a good word with him and he contacts you, reaches out. I remember I knew the Pittsburgh job was up, and Willie Desjardins, who's a good friend of mine, had just won the American League. We had been 4 years in a row in the league championship and gone once to the Memorial Cup. So Willie was going to be interviewing for some jobs when the American League season finished. So I went into Vancouver. They were looking for a coach, and I interviewed there. Then I remember coming back to Portland, and we rode on the golf course, and a friend of mine, his buddy is a trainer in Pittsburgh. And he said, well, we were on the golf course one day, he said, I'm hearing your name in Pittsburgh. I said, really? I said, I haven't heard anything. He said, no, I talked to my buddy who's a trainer there, and he's saying that your name's being thrown around as a candidate for the head coaching job. And all of a sudden, 2 days later, I got a call from Jim Rutherford and said, we're interested in you as the head coach of our team. Would you come down to interview? And that was that. It was incredible how quick it was. The interview process wasn't long. And coincidentally enough, Willie interviewed for that job in Pittsburgh, and he took the Vancouver job, and then I got the Pittsburgh job. And both of us who are good friends were hired 5 days away from each other with those NHL jobs. So that's how it happened. It's some people would think, oh, it's a long, drawn-out process. I had an interview in LA when Mark Crawford got let go for the head coaching job in LA with Ron Hextall and Dean Lombardi. That took about a month, but I was there. I was their assistant coach. They wanted to see if I was ready to be their head coach. So I went through a long process. But the Pittsburgh job was, we're interested in you. We've done our research. Would you interview? And then it just spun from there.
And I'm sure having that Crosby fella involved probably made it. When you look at that list, the Crosby, Malkin, Fleury, those kind of guys. That I'm sure when we talked about Brian Burke earlier, that was kind of when people asked him, Brian, why do you want to do this? And he said, well, this, and this. Not a bad situation. Was that the same thing for you, kind of thing? The enjoyment of working with that echelon of player, or is that challenging as a new coach to kind of go into that situation and try and lay your own kind of landscape kind of thing?
Well, the two bits of advice I got before I took the job was, one is, they expect to win the Stanley Cup every year. And for me, anywhere I've ever gone, that's our expectation too, is that we're going to win. We're going to find a way to win. So that didn't scare me. The other thing is I had heard that some coaches were nervous about maybe taking that job over another job because of the expectation, because of the star power. But that was exciting to me. I know a little bit about Sid because actually we grew up probably 5 miles from each other in different decades, but we still grew up close to each other. He was in Cole Harbor, and my parents' house is just on the edge of Cole Harbor. So I had known about Sid for a long time. We have mutual friends. So the opportunity to go to Pittsburgh and coach some of the best players in the world, coach in a situation where they demanded that you won and demanded excellence. For me, I couldn't think of a better job. It was great. And even though people will say, well, it only lasted 1.5 years and you got let go and you were fired as a head coach. I was, but I would have to say that I wouldn't have done too many things different. I enjoyed the experience, and I would take that job again any day.
Now, obviously, the names that come through, the Sid and and the Evgeny Malkin and those kind of guys. Were there guys in that group that I always like asking coach about those unsung heroes, the guy that was kind of the one who didn't get the most amount of attention, but as a coach, you loved him, or you're always impressed by what he did. He maybe just didn't get the attention that maybe some of the star names did, or was it kind of just a good group across the board?
Well, we had a lot of personalities in the room, both the star players and basically your 4 star players were Fleury, who was incredible. Everything you see on Fleury, when you watch a game or see him talk after the game, that's who he is. That's exactly who he is. He's an upbeat, fun-loving guy, practices all day long till the last player leaves the ice, and just has a smile on his face every day. Chris Letang wants to study video every day with the coaches. He'll come into the room, he'll want to look at video, want to talk to the coaches, have a coffee with the coaches. Very engaged. Malkin, kind of a free-spirited guy. Kind of free-spirited, fun-loving. He doesn't always show that personality. Huge talent. And then you have their number one guy, without question, is Sid. And Sid is hardworking, dedicated, committed, all hockey all the time, summer, winter, and that's why he does what he does. And when I saw the Michael Jordan, I'm sure everybody on this here probably watched the series. That reminded me a lot of Sid. That's the level he's at every day.
Obviously, the situation at hand with the group right now, there's a lot of people saying they're at that win now to kind of the top end of the quote unquote window sort of thing. You've been there, you've seen those personalities, you know what the between the ownership group and the big players sort of thing. Where do you think that group's at, or are they on, or is all this talk of does this guy go somewhere else, and does Sid change a jersey, which I know from the fans in the black and yellow, they can't imagine 87 being in any other color. But is it interesting that conversation's happening now, or is that just a situation of the team?
Well, I can't believe that'll ever happen. I don't think it will, but Gretzky did, so I guess it could happen. But Sid is the reason they have a chance to win every year is because the focus of Crosby and the drive of Crosby is at another level every day, every year. And so that's why they have a chance. And until he gets to a point where his game starts to really deteriorate, which it hasn't at all, and I don't expect it will over the next couple of years, they've got a chance. But to go back to your previous question, when I was there, Pascal Dupuis was a key glue guy on the team, and he had health issues when I came in, so we didn't get his full impact. But guys like Chris Kunitz were extremely valuable to the group as well. And so assembling those players around the star players are going to be key in Pittsburgh as they start to move through the next couple of years. It's just, you need to assemble several players that can really supplement those key guys, because you've got guys that can play at another level, but to manage the cap and find players that can be inserted in the lineup that can be impact, that's the challenge of Brian Burke and Ron Hextall.
Was that how much did that experience of kind of dealing with those guys and everything when you go back to Portland in 16, was that obviously it's a head coach, general manager, additional management involvement sort of thing, was that kind of similar to when you said you went to Portland initially? It was the opportunity to do something different that you hadn't done, and how much did the Pittsburgh experience kind of help into that transition back to junior?
Well, coaching at the NHL level as a head coach is much different than an assistant or associate coach. So I always say the assistant coaches, and when I was an associate coach, I had a lot of advice, a lot of input. But when you're the head coach, you live and die with your decision. So everything you do every day and every decision you make in the game, outside the game, is scrutinized, and you have to live and die with everything you do. Whereas an associate coach can kind of back away, and they had partial input. So I always think that I've always enjoyed my opportunities over the years to be a head coach. And so in Portland, I could do that. And at the NHL level, I could do that. So I had a choice when I left Pittsburgh. Do I want to stay in the NHL and be an assistant or associate coach? Or do I want to go back to Portland and try and impact the game, impact kids, and be a head coach? And so that's the choice I made when I left Pittsburgh, is to come back and to work at this level. And I enjoy everything from what our scouts do to identify a player, to when we pick them for our team and recruiting them, to when they leave to go to the NHL. That whole package, I really enjoy it from start to finish.
Now, obviously, hockey world, the world in general, kind of thrown into, all over the place the last little while. What was, first to ask you, what was it like when obviously the junior season shuts down prematurely, no Memorial Cup, all those kind of things? It was kind of the same thing that, the Mustangs were, we were in Nova Scotia at the time. The team wins a big game over Saskatchewan. I know the guys were all talking about medal round and that kind of thing. What was the situation like for your group at that time, earlier last year?
Well, first I followed the University Nationals. I bought my dad tickets to the playoffs, or in Halifax, because he lives in Dartmouth. So he had tickets to the game, and I remember phoning him on, I think it was Friday afternoon, and teams, you guys had already played, I think on Thursday maybe of that week, and I phoned him on Friday and said, "Are you going to the game tonight?" And he said, oh, no, it sounds like the tournament's going to be canceled. I said, no way. I said, they've already started playing. And I was really shocked and obviously disappointed for teams like Western and that had very good teams. And Acadia was hosting. That's where I went to school. So I was following it closely. Back to us in Portland, we were going to board the bus that Thursday to go to Spokane. We had 3 games left in our season, and our season was canceled. We were in first place at that time, and fortunately enough, they declared us the winners of the league. But unfortunately, I thought we had a really good team. We had the Canada's World Junior goalie, Joel Hofer. We had 5 drafted players in our lineup. So I thought, geez, we had a chance to make a deep run and maybe go to another Memorial Cup. So it was really unfortunate that happened. The only good thing is that prior to that, at the trade deadline in January, we decided as an organization that we had a young team and we were not going to make any moves. So we didn't trade for anybody at the trade deadline. We stayed with our team. So we didn't give up draft picks. We didn't give up young players. So actually for this year, when we start up in a couple of weeks and for next year, I still believe we'll be pretty good.
Now, the Canadian contingent of the WHL is starting later in the month. There's going to be similar to everybody making a deal in the NHL about there being a Canadian division, or the North Division as they call it. You guys will be having the American contingent, and you start latter half mid March, I believe, correct?
Well, we have 4 divisions in the Western Hockey League. So Alberta will start on February 26th, and then our U.S. division will start on March 19th with games. And then BC and Manitoba, Saskatchewan haven't been announced yet. So Manitoba and Saskatchewan will play together. They may have to play in a bubble to get an exemption. And BC might have to do the same. So BC is looking at Kamloops and Kelowna, putting the players up for 2 months and playing games. And I know the Saskatchewan group's looking at Regina and putting the players up there for 2 months and playing games. So I think everybody's just trying to do whatever they can to give the kids an experience this year, a development opportunity, exposure, so that they, the 20-year-olds have a chance to move on, and that the young kids have an opportunity to potentially be drafted with NHL exposure. And
then definitely a shortened season in the 20-game territory. I know there's a lot of talk here in Ontario about whether or not the OHL will start up. I know from some hardcore junior fans in the Ontario market, they're saying, well, wait a second, the WHL is starting up. You guys have to start up too. But how much is this extra shortened season? Does it change the preparation, or has it been kind of a hurry up and wait scenario where you've got everything prepared for what it will be for your group? It's just a matter of waiting for a day and and the word go kind of thing. And what's the preparation been like?
Well, we started in October, strategy Zoom calls. That lasted about a month, and then we figured that we might be a little bit longer before we come back. So we parked that and we went to professional development opportunities. We had a series of 11 weeks of NHL guests on a Zoom call with our players and our parents. We did that with NHL general managers, coaches, and players. And then now we've transitioned more into the prep phase. But it's going to be 24 games without playoffs, without a Memorial Cup. It's basically going to be a prep for next year and an exposure for our players that are moving on to the NHL, American League, university coaches, so that they can see our players and they get opportunities beyond this. It's a 3-month, 90-day development opportunity. That's what it is.
On social media today, Red Deer's making a bit of a stir because they posted a picture of one of their suites at their arena with something I don't think that's been seen in a hockey. I could be wrong, but a hockey arena suite: a bed, a side table, a light, a desk, and they're making their luxury suites or the suites in the arena into apartments for their players. Is this something that's kind of being, widespread across the league, or is this just a situation by situation for teams in the WHL for trying to keep everybody kind of as contained as possible kind of thing?
Well, I'm sure I'm in the U.S. Most of your viewers, I'm sure, are in Canada, and every part of Canada has different restrictions. And in order to make it work in the province of Alberta, they were really restricted in what they could do, and they felt that it was just too much of a risk to put their players in billet homes. So I thought Brent Sutter come up with a great idea. I give him credit for doing this. He decided that he would have his players at the arena all day, and he would house them in the suite. So each player gets a suite. And as you mentioned, it has the billets brought in beds. They've got a bathroom there. The suite is theirs for the next couple months, and they'll practice there. They'll play there. They'll go to away games, but confined to their group on the bus when they go to away games, and they'll have a chef in the rink to cook their meals. So I thought it was really creative that they did that. And I think that's the thing that in this COVID environment, different businesses, different sporting organizations have looked for ways to be able to function, and you've got to be creative, you've got to be adaptable, and that's pretty unique, I thought, what they did.
When you see that kind of thing, does it make you kind of, obviously with heavy involvement in the decision making for your team, kind of going, or did you obviously had plans in place for what your players and where they're going to go this year?
Yeah, we talked about it a lot, and we had some concerns about just the mental health of our players, what they've had to deal with, and then coming into Portland, we felt if we isolated them too much, that it would be tough on them. So we have great billets, and we've explained to the billets the risk, but we've also explained to the players and the billets very strict protocol. Our players will be tested 3 times per week, and will wear masks everywhere, and even for practices, not for games. So we have very strict routines for the players once they arrive in Portland, but I just felt we need them to at least get outside of our group or our cohort or our bubble and have some interaction. I talked to a lot of players and coaches that were in the NHL bubble, and it was tough. If any of you have talked to people that were in there, I'm sure they'll tell you it was a bit of a struggle. It was demanding just because you're so isolated all the time.
I'll get one more in here for folks watching along. Feel free to throw in your questions now so I can start pulling those out here so I can keep on time before Clark starts poking me with a stick and saying, Robinson, you need to stop talking, which we all know I'll keep doing forever. You mentioned the NHL bubble. The season's going on now. They're not obviously doing the bubble, but I would be remiss if I didn't ask you about the team that is leading in the NHL right now, because I'm sure a lot of viewership from our area and across Canada are may or may not be Leaf fans. We'll leave that alone. But is this a situation that you've seen this team in multiple facets kind of thing? Or do they have enough at this point, or is it a scenario where it's going to be tough when they get they're doing well against the Canadian contingent? Is it going to be tougher when they get to the other teams that they're not going to see in this shortened schedule?
Well, everybody builds their team in different ways, and when I describe to our recruits what are the Portland Winterhawks like, I often say we're like Tampa, we're like Toronto. That's how we play. We play up-tempo, we attack, we're always on our toes, we pressure, we have skilled players, we have players that can make plays. That's what I believe in. We have defense that are very active in the rush. And when St. Louis won, there were a lot of questions. Is Toronto tough enough, big enough, strong enough, heavy enough? There's questions in our league every year. Are we the same? Are we big enough, tough enough, heavy enough? But I think what Toronto's done, I give Kyle a lot of credit there, that they've stuck to a philosophy of how they're going to build their team. And I remember 3 years ago, we had a player that I really believed in. Florida eventually drafted him in the 3rd round and signed him, a defenseman. But I remember talking to the Toronto scout, and he brought his name up with Kyle, and Kyle just said, no offense, but tell Mike we need more talent. Like I side with talent. And this guy was a strong, physical, two-way defenseman, but more on the edge side. And we had Kyle Dubas on a call with our players this year, and he talked about the same thing, that he wasn't going to be deterred from building a certain type of team. What he added this year was the veteran character, and I think that that's paid dividends for him.
I will heed to some questions now. First one from Rick Odegaard comes in. I'll throw it up on screen here too, but I'll just kind of narrate at the same time. Obviously getting towards your team sort of thing, and the talk from Edmonton changing names to Washington in the NFL. A lot of talk of use of indigenous names and logos. Obviously, the Winterhawks using that kind of imagery for the logo. I know you guys also have some alternate logos as well that kind of build around almost a P kind of thing. Is this a situation where your group is kind of looking at this, or is it? I know the Chicago Blackhawks said the same thing, where they said that they kind of it's part of the brand of the team, and obviously looking at education, but also connecting with the Indigenous community.
Yeah, and we had a meeting today with ownership and our management group here, and we've been discussing this quite thoroughly. And there's two parts to it. One is the name. Our name's fine. Winterhawk is fine as a name. The chief symbol that the Blackhawks have ours is almost identical symbol, and that came when Edmonton moved here back in the 70s. That was the logo of the team that was adopted. The Winterhawk. And so first is, as I mentioned today when we had a discussion, is first let's find out, is the symbol the chief symbol, which the Blackhawks have explained is a proud symbol, is it offensive? And if it's offensive to certain groups, then we have to deal with it for sure. And we've heard some things in the past that maybe that is the case, but we want to be sure. Because I love the logo. I think it's classic, as is the Blackhawk logo. But again, I think we have to be sensitive to groups that if we have a name or if we have a logo that's offensive to certain people, then we have to look at what are our options. We have Adidas here in town. Their head office is here in Portland, believe it or not, for the NHL. So they have all the jerseys for the NHL, and they did a couple logos for us that we could use as our third logo, and in preparation if we had to change our logo. So we have some new options now that we're going to be trying and pushing forward, but that's being thoroughly discussed right now.
Another question coming in, Ron asking about how did obviously there was so much talk when we were in the national program last year about that UNB team and how they've kind of worked it in. How did they turn your group starting that out and then kind of continuing on down the line? How did that program go from when you said a tough situation for that group when you got there to now being one of the top teams across the university landscape each year?
Well, there's a couple things. One, before I got there, they had a couple of pretty good coaches. Doug McLean was there. Donnie McAdam was there. But they had fallen on some hard times. But I remember when I first arrived on campus for my interview, I looked around and I said, one, Fredericton's a great city. Two, we have a facility right on campus. And the American League team was there at the time. They went away for a couple of years, and then they came back while I was still there. So American League was in the same building. Three, the programs academically at the University of New Brunswick, they had top-notch programs, top-notch engineering. They had law. They had every program you'd want. So when I went there for my interview, I just looked around, and I said to myself, if I can't recruit a player to come to this school, then there's something wrong. So I saw tons of potential there, and I think that's really what they have. They have a small community, they have a facility on campus, and they have fans. They have a community where there's not a lot of other things at a high level to go watch. And the Varsity Reds have carved a niche for themselves that everybody knows that's the thing to go to in town. And Gardner McDougall, I give him a lot of credit, has taken grassroots hockey and has a Varsity Reds kids program that goes to tournaments. They have the hockey schools. They have players from all over coming in to train there. He's really taken it to a new level over the last 10 years. And obviously, as you see with national championships, it's paid dividends for him.
It's been something that we've seen even at Western, obviously with Sport Western camps in the summer. And I know Clark and his players and the women's team have been heavily involved in those camps as well. So it's definitely a giving back to the community side of things. I hope you can stick around for a couple extra minutes. We got a bunch of questions coming in, so I want to make sure I try to get to everybody. Question, obviously, I think this is Dwayne, which is a good friend, Dwayne. So I know he under this National Skills Development Association. But advice for young coaches trying to get kind of to that next level, whether it be looking to kind of make the jump into junior or the junior to pro. Kind of what would your advice to those people be?
Well, there'd be two things, and I often get asked that question. Number one is, like I did when I was a young coach, I would try and get involved in your provincial programs, whether it's under 16, under 15, regional camps, whatever it is, where you can work with other elite coaches or motivated coaches, and you work with the top players. So I would volunteer, bug people to help out in any way I could to get involved with those programs. The second thing I would do is, a lot of young coaches want to move up fast. They want to go to midget, and then they want to be an assistant coach in junior. Then they want to be an assistant coach in major junior, and just keep moving up without gaining the skills that they need to be a very good coach. So I would recommend, it sounds simple, but take a bantam team or a midget team and coach them for 3 or 4 years and establish a reputation of what is your team. What is a Clark Singer team? What is a Mike Johnston team? Establish a reputation and a philosophy of how you want to develop players, train, code of conduct, all those things. And if you can start to form a base as a young coach, and it doesn't matter the level, it can be a Pee Wee program, bantam program, midget program, you will get a reputation. As I said, Ken Hitchcock was working at United Cycle, and everybody knew Ken Hitchcock because he coached the midget team, and that team barely lost a game every year. And they played a certain style that teams could not compete against. That's where Ken Hitchcock started. That's where he built his coaching career, from coaching that midget team.
Grant asking your thoughts on, more so on the professional side of things, but coaches getting let go or being the scapegoat when it's really reality. Either the team doesn't like the GM or some mismanagement, or some people don't like the GM decision. The players decide, sometimes they kind of almost quit on the coach. Is that, what are your thoughts on that kind of aspect of the game? Because is it actually a truth to the fact sort of thing?
Well, I think with good organizations, there's a lot of patience. In some organizations, there's less. But I remember when I was a young coach coming in with Vancouver, talking to Brian Burke one night on a flight home, and I was saying, I can't believe another coach got fired. I said, why don't the GMs get fired? I said, I was just kidding him. And he said, Mike, you don't know the way it works. He said, I'll tell you the way it works at this level. He said, when the heat gets on me, you guys are the guys that are going off the plane. He said, you guys will be the first ones out the door. And he was kind of kidding, but that's the way it is. And those days when the heat was on the GM wasn't losing his job. It was going to be the coach, because then it bought the GM another couple of years, as he explained, and that's the way it worked. But Brian wasn't that way, but he bluntly explained to me as a young guy and we used to keep track. Okay, another coach got fired. What about the GMs? How many of those have been fired this year? And we keep tabs on it. But now with the cap era, what's happened is the GMs are under more scrutiny because they can be measured. Because of the cap and because of free agency, it wasn't the case when I came in 2000 to the Vancouver Canucks. Now the GMs can be measured more concretely, so you're seeing more GMs get let go on a regular basis. That's just the nature of the sport, though. That's the way it is at that level. You roll your shoulders, you try and do the best job you can, and then that's unfortunately the way it is.
I would make a joke about this. This question comes from the test run interview that I had, and he wasn't as talkative as you. So I've appreciated this conversation, Mike. But this Patrick Ouellette, obviously one of the assistants with our men's hockey team, talking about the fact that he made the move up to come and play for Clark. What was your experience like? He said his was outstanding, but needed that transition year to make the jump to CIS hockey, and we all know the grit that Mr. Ouellette brings to the game. But what was that experience like for you?
Well, as Patrick will know, Camrose College, where I started coaching, became Augustana University later, and affiliated with the University of Alberta. But we were essentially, during my time, a 2-year program. We would feed players to the University of Calgary, to Saskatoon, to the U of A. And we were about bringing kids in who wanted a small college atmosphere to begin with and play hockey. And then they would go to a bigger school and play at a higher level. And so it was a great place for me to start. And I think the students appreciate Augustana because it has a close-knit teachers, students. It's a very small campus, and you just feel like you're part of it. Whereas on a bigger campus at the U of A or U of C, you might get lost with 40,000 students. As a young student just leaving high school, small town Alberta or smaller towns, they really appreciate what Augustana had to offer.
One more here before I send things back over to Clark. Dan checking in, kind of going back to the junior side of things. How do you ensure your players stay focused on their education in addition to playing hockey? Because I know that's a huge aspect of the junior hockey game, is the making sure that the students or the players are in school, getting their education, and obviously potentially utilizing the package that's available to them for their education afterwards.
Well, when I came to Portland, I said to our owner it would be under one condition, and that's if he was willing to pay for every player to go to school every day. So we don't have an option here in Portland. All our players go to school. We're like a sports school. So our kids are either in high school at Sunset, or we have a college professor just down the hall here in the classroom every day. So our players take 2 university courses. Because one thing that bothered me about junior hockey back when I was coaching at university and used to recruit junior players was that some organizations would focus on schooling and others wouldn't. Other organizations, the players just came in the morning at 11 o'clock. They check in with the coach, say, hi, I'm here, go off and have their lunch, come back and practice. But I didn't really want that. And when I came into Portland, it was a struggle the first 2 years for our players that have been here, because they said, well, nobody else in the league is doing this. We have to come in every morning. We're going to be tired. And I just said, there's just the way we're going to do it. And we've done it since day one. All our players go to school every day. And so I think the bottom line is, no matter what environment you're going into, as a coach, you have to have what you believe is the right in culture, I guess you would say, and you have to develop it and you have to stick to it, even though it may not be the favorable thing to do right away. But I believe in school because a university education, because that's what I had, and I think it's important for our kids. I know it's important, so I'm proud that when our guys leave our program, they'll have at least a year and a couple of courses already done when they finish in Portland.
All right, and just going to get one more here, and it's just a comment coming in from Ron. As my mouse doesn't want to work for me, it might be losing power. Who knows? But yeah, echoing Ron's comments here. But great to have a chat, and thank you for putting up with me for an hour. It was a great opportunity to get a little bit of insight on your thoughts across various landscapes. So thank you for putting up with me kind of bouncing all over the place for an hour. It's been a lot of fun. So thanks a lot.
You're great, Ryan. You could do this for a living. You should look for that.
I'll pass things back over. I think Clark's in there somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, Mike, before I get into thank yous, I just had one one last question for you. I don't want to really put you on the spot, but your journey to the NHL as a head coach and now back to Portland. I listened to an interview with Brian Burke the other day after he'd been hired in Pittsburgh, and he said after his time in Calgary as president of hockey operations there, he said there are only 2 teams on his list in the National Hockey League that he would go back to if he was asked to return to the NHL. And obviously one of them was Pittsburgh. So he went back there. What draws Mike Johnston back to the National Hockey League at some point later in your career? Obviously doing a tremendous job there in Portland. You're in control of everything. But, if you look at, Rick Bowness in Dallas, Glenn Gulletson in Edmonton, even Mark Crawford, he went back to Ottawa as an assistant coach, and Jacques Martin, who you had in Pittsburgh. All those coaches, went after being head coaches in the National League back to be an assistant coach. What brings you back to the NHL, if anything?
Well, I've convinced myself that to go back to the NHL as an assistant or associate coach, that doesn't interest me. I enjoy having more of an impact, I would say, or having the opportunity to have more of an impact. So I can do that at this level. If something drew me back to the NHL at one point, it would have to be that I've satisfied my desire to coach and I want to maybe help out on the management side in some capacity. And I feel what I've done at the junior level on the management side of things has really helped me learn that side, whether it's contracts, whether it's dealing with agents, whether it's developing a team, a culture from that point of view. That may draw me back at one point. But I really, as you know, Clark, at the university level as a coach, you oversee the strength and conditioning, sports psych, the on-ice development, the recruiting. You just have an impact in such a broad area. I love that part of it. And I found it at the NHL level. It was exciting. It's thrilling. Trying to win a Stanley Cup is amazing. But I wanted to do more than a couple drills at practice and run the power play. That's just me.
Okay. Well, and one last comment before the thank yous. And I don't know if those of you in the audience could read Mike's jacket he's wearing there that says Hockey Coaches Conference. And although Mike's coaching resume over the last 35 years is outstanding, I think one of the biggest impacts Mike has had on the game is in development. Mike never turns down an opportunity to help prospective coaches. I can just say for my own professional development, there's been nobody in the game in North America that has had probably as much impact on my development as a coach than Mike. He's been generous enough to have me to Vancouver, have me work with him in Team Canada in Europe, even have me down to Pittsburgh when he was there. And, I could text him, email him, call him at any time during the week about a question of the power play, the 1-3-1 forecheck, how to handle something. And he's always been generous enough to get back to me very, very shortly. So, Mike, I want to not only thank you for being on with us tonight, but for everything you do for all of us in the game here across the country. Hope you continue to have a great impact, both in the WHL, but with coaches. I know you will. I want to thank Ryan again for all you've done, your great interview tonight. I want to thank my seventh man group. I want to thank Tricia Thane Hall and Dory Moonsey for all their work and putting this on. Our next session is with the Rash Madani from Rogers Sportsnet, Thursday, February 25th. So 2 weeks from tonight. I hope everybody in the audience enjoyed our first Mustang Hockey Hot Stove session. Stay safe and healthy, and we'll see everybody in a couple weeks. Thanks again.
Thanks, Clark. Thanks, Ryan.
Thanks so much.
Thanks.